We're going to tell you everything you need to know to catch more of the glass-eyed, toothy walleye. With its delicious white flaky meat tantalizing your taste buds. We're going to show you what baits to use, where they're hiding, and proven techniques, tips, and tricks to put them in the cooler every time.
Okay, let's start off with the best baits to catch walleye. Those being live emerald shiner minnows, live night crawlers, and live leeches. All three work really well depending on the walleye's feeding mood on that particular day. The walleye, like many other fish species, go crazy for live minnows, especially in the 2 to 3 inch length. But if you can get them in the 4-inch or larger size, they can catch the really big eyes in the 25 to 30 inch size range or even bigger. But just remember to hook the minnow through the lips so they swim more naturally and they will stay alive longer that way. Okay, now pay attention. Here are some really great tips to keep your minnows lasting longer for a full day of fishing. That is, to put some hydrogen peroxide in the minnow bucket water, which will add oxygen. You can also put some ice cubes in baggies in the bottom of the bucket to cool the water temperature. But just remember, don't put the ice cubes directly into the water because the chemicals and chlorine, etc. in the water will kill off the minnows pretty quick. And you've got to make sure you've always got a really good aerator that's pumping oxygen into the minnow bucket at all times to keep them alive longer. And you can also use 2 styrofoam buckets to spread the minnows out. That prevents them from bumping into each other and lets the oxygen diffuse into the water more in both buckets to keep them alive longer. So just as good as the live minnow is a juicy, plump, and lively night crawler that can be jigged or used on a worm harness while drift casting at different depths. The natural scent and wiggle of the worm also drives walleye crazy, and I've actually caught just as many eyes on night crawlers over the years as I have on minnows. Now, another great tip here is to keep your worms in a styrofoam container in the refrigerator with enough breathing holes to allow enough oxygen and air to get in. I keep my worms in the fridge year-round on their own dedicated shelf because this makes them much harder, thicker, plumper, and much more lively. I promise you, using refrigerated worms will catch you better and bigger fish every time. We'll talk more later about specific techniques, but leeches work great for walleye too. All you do is hook it through the front of the head onto your favorite bright colored jig. Leeches usually work best in late spring to fall when the water temperature is over 50 degrees so they can swim better. They are also deadly on smallmouth bass, so if you're fishing rocky points and structure, you may catch both. Now here you want to keep leeches refrigerated too and in chilled water when you're out fishing. And you can use lake water, but again here, never put ice cubes or tap water in there as the chlorine will kill the leeches as well. One of the real joys of walleye fishing is actually finding the fish, especially if you're in the wide open, expansive waters of Lake Erie, which is considered the walleye capital of the world. But for the most part, it comes down to a couple of factors you need to better understand to catch walleye in whatever lake you're fishing. Generally, those being the water temperature and the structure and type of cover that's in the lake. So much like for largemouth bass, the most important key to finding walleye is navigating the lake so that you best understand the structure, points, humps, drop-offs, etc. in that lake because walleye love to hug structure. Now, one of the main reasons for this is because structure typically holds bait fish, which the walleye, of course, will be feeding after. So if you can find the rocky ledges, drop-offs, boulder and rock piles, humps, and points where shallower water produces rock protrusions, these will all be great areas to find walleye. Now, it's important to understand that walleye are usually in the deeper water during the day, especially during the summer months, and they'll usually feed in more shallow regions of the lake at dusk and nearing nighttime. Remember, too, that walleye are a schooling fish, so you want to try and find larger areas of structure, like we just mentioned, and larger areas of weed line cover that can support larger schools of fish. Double headers are not uncommon if you have multiple rods out in different depths. That's what makes fishing for walleye so much fun. In terms of water temperature, 60 to 70 degrees is usually the prime temperature for walleye to feed most aggressively. And that's usually in late spring to early summer, and then again in fall. When you get into mid to late summer and the water temps in the 75 to 80 degree range, the walleye will always be much deeper in the lake and most likely holding close to the cover and structure we just talked about. If you didn't know, walleye are very sensitive to light, so much like bass, the best time to fish for them is early morning and dusk to early evening. During the midday high bright sun, they're gonna never be in shallow water. They're gonna be transitioning out to deeper water looking for shade. Okay, now we know what to feed them and where to find them, so now we're going to cover the best tips and techniques for how to catch the best and biggest walleye every time you're out on the lake. Let's go. Probably the most popular way to catch walleye is vertically casting jigs tipped with emerald shiner minnows or worms like we talked about back in tip 1, or drift casting with worms on a worm harness using a good old-fashioned erie-deerie. So when you are jigging with these live baits, all you have to do is lift the bait up about a foot or so every 5 or 6 seconds, then drop it back down, pause it, and continue doing this so that you're giving action to the jig blades and you're making the bait move more lively for them. And of course, one of my favorite ways is trolling crankbaits and hard plastics at different depths to catch the walleye who's always on the move. And you can even catch walleye still fishing with any of the live baits we mentioned under a slip bobber. That's going to allow you to get down into deeper water, and especially if there's a school of them, you can put a whole mess of them in the boat quick. Remember, if you are drift fishing or trolling baits at depths, use Spot Fish Hat on your depth finder. Make sure to set the lure about a foot or so above where you show them marking, because fish feed up and will come up to get the bait more times than not. Some of our favorite colors we have used to catch monster walleye in any and all types of watercolor are silver and red like you're seeing here, hot orange and hot pink, fire tiger like you just saw, and blue and silver and green and silver herringbone. We love the Hottentots and the Rapala husky jerks. And if no color seems to be working that particular day, a shiny gold metallic lure will almost always catch walleye in any lake condition. So you always want to make sure you got at least a couple of gold lures in your tackle box when you're walleye fishing. Okay, so let's wrap this up with a few cool and interesting facts and tidbits about the walleye's favorite habits and tendencies. I've mentioned before that the more you can think like a walleye, the more fish you will catch, period. We mentioned earlier that the walleye is very sensitive to light, so you're not going to find them feeding on the surface or in shallow water on a hot, sunny day. They prefer to live near the lake bottom and in deeper, darker water. So during the daytime, you're going to find them out in deeper water under logs, roots, and other aquatic vegetation that they move into. And then as night falls, they'll be going into shallower bays, shoals, weed beds when the sun starts setting and dusk rolls in. This is because walleye have opaque, pearlescent eyes that allow them to see best in low light conditions. Tons of big walleye are caught at night every day in Lake Erie. So if you are able to fish for them at night, you might end up catching the biggest fish ever, kind of just like catfishing. The biggest walleye ever recorded was a whopping 42 inches long and 29 pounds. Absolutely massive. And the oldest recorded walleye on record was an ancient 29 years old. And lastly, if you didn't already know, walleye have a mouthful of sharp teeth. So never put your fingers in their mouth. Make sure you've always got a good pair of pliers or a good hook remover with you to get the treble hooks out. Happy fishing. Go get the walleye. We'll see you out on the water.
Okay, folks, thanks for watching. Please like this video, hit the subscribe button before you leave, and don't forget to enable your bell notifications so you never miss another great video coming your way.